Good evening. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the Chair of this committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public attending aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill tonight, so if the fire alarm goes off, please make your way out of the nearest emergency exit and gather at the front of Runnymede Hall. Meetings of the committee are webcast and broadcast on the internet. If you're seated in the public area of the council chamber, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast and recording. Lastly, may I ask all present to switch mobile phones to silent. May I ask the Development Management Committee members present who are seated in the chamber in the row to my left of me introduce themselves stating your name only.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Peter Gregg, I'm Vice Chairman of this committee.
Good evening, Councillor Alan Acott.
Good evening, Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening, Councillor John Anderson.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening, Councillor Hannah Barton-Brown.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Russ Savage.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
And Councillor Tom Skip.
Thank you, members. May I ask any members present to introduce themselves? Any other members?
Councillor Andrew Thornton.
Councillor Tom Gibson.
Councillor Diana Jones.
Councillor Mike Dearson.
Councillor Lindsay McCarthy Calvert.
Councillor Steve Mountford. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again, starting on my left.
Stephen Garner, the Planning Manager.
Cheryl Salmon, the Committee Officer.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to the Committee.
And Hannah Blaney, Trainee Solicitor.
Thank you very much. Item 1 is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, I have apologies from Councillor Lewis and Councillor Savage is substituting this evening.
Item 2 is members' interests. Are there any members' interests? Item 3 is minutes. Are the minutes for the Development Management Committee meeting held on the 3rd of October 2023 agreed? Agreed. Item 4 is public speakers. Councillor Knott will speak as ward councillor. Item 5 is deposited plans. Item 1 on those deposited plans is land south of Daws, Heath Road, Thundersley, Victoria Ward. I'll now hand over to the planning officer to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the site land south of Daws Heath Road in Thundersley, and this is an outline application for up to 58 dwellings with associated vehicular access with all other matters reserved. So this is a major application that is being presented to the Development Management Committee this evening because it is considered to be of sufficient scale to warrant full consideration by the committee. You'll note from the agenda before you that there is a procedural section that sets out that this application has not been determined within the statutory 13-week timeframe, and after agreeing one extension of time which expired on the 4th of July, there was no agreement from the applicant for a further extension of time. The reason for this application was not determined was because all relevant consultee comments had not been received. Notably in this instance was Highways, and a comment from Highways was not received until the 28th of August, which is a long time after the 4th of July extended period. The applicant gave notice of their intent to appeal on non-determination of this application on the 22nd of August, which was before Highways comments were received. Unfortunately, following discussions between officers who proposed a time frame to present this application to a committee in mid-November, the applicant considered this was unacceptable, and an appeal was lodged on the 15th of September on grounds of non-determination. Therefore, this evening, the role of the committee is slightly different from what it would normally be, where they would be determining the actual outcome and decision of the application. They will instead be confirming what the council's recommendation would have been had the appeal not been lodged. And this confirmed recommendation will then form a core document and part of the council's case during the appeal, which has already been lodged. Another important point to note this evening is that this is an outline planning application, where the only aspects being sought for approval are the principle of the development and also the access. All other matters such as appearance, landscaping, layout and scale would form part of a reserved matters application, which would be submitted at a later date if this application is approved. And so therefore tonight it is only the principle and the access to the site which is up for consideration. So, turning to the application itself, the application site is some 4.7 hectares in size, located to the south of Daws Heath Road. You've got a fishery to the north here, along with residential properties over here. You've got some more residential properties to the east, along with the Ragwood Riding Centre. And to the east and southwest, you've got an area of ancient woodlands. You've got the Valerie Wells Wood here, and Westwood down here. And you've got the Dean's School over here as well. The site forms part of a narrow north-south strip of greenbelt, which separates the settlements of Thundersley to the west and Daws Heath to the east. And in this strip, it's only subject to minor sporadic development. You've got the Daws Heath timber yard and a number of small houses, but they don't they don't represent a more suburban or urban built form. So this evening, outline permission is sought for the development of the site with up to 58 dwellings. That means that at a later stage it may come in and it could be less than that. However, the maximum amount of dwellings, if approved, would be 58. There would be no more allowed. They're also proposing an associated vehicular access, parking, public open space, a play space, attenuation basins for drainage, and other landscape enhancements. It's proposed to form a vehicular access onto the site as well, which I'll show you shortly, but to give you some context for the site, this is sort of part of the frontage of the site, and this existing access gate along here is where the proposed vehicular access would be. And then this image here shows a further sort of shot of the site looking out across the fields as they currently are. The applicant has provided, because this is only outline, they've provided an indicative layout plan for part of the site, which shows the access to the north here, along with these orange sections, which are proposed to be areas of residential development, with roads highlighted in the dashed white lines. So, turning to, and they've also provided an indicative layout plan of what the site may look like. However, I would stress that this is only indicative. This is not what may actually come forward in the future. It's just them providing a copy of what the site may look like. So, turning to the main point of consideration, I'll start with the vehicular access to the site located on the northern boundary here. There's been no objection raised to the proposed access by the Highways Authority, and officers have not found a defensible reason to object to the access either. So turning to the next point, which is the principle of the development, planning law requires that applications be determined in accordance with the development plan. The local plan is our current adopted development plan, and this identifies the site as Greenbelt. Whilst there are no saved plans within the local plan that seek to establish the general principles of development within the Greenbelt, this means that the starting point for considering this application lies with planning policy and the National Planning Policy Framework. The NPPF sets out that inappropriate development with the Greenbelt should not be permitted unless very special circumstances exist, and even then substantial weight should be given to any harm to the Greenbelt. The development has been identified by officers as being inappropriate development, and therefore it should not be approved unless very special circumstances exist. The applicant has posited a number of factors which they consider to amount individually and cumulatively to very special circumstances. These are a lack of housing land supply, shortage of affordable housing stock, a lack of an up-to-date planning policies, and an out-of-date development plan. Having considered these factors, officers do not consider that either individually or cumulatively these outweigh the identified harm to the Greenbelt, particularly given the crucial function this land is considered to serve toward the functions of the strategic purpose of the Greenbelt set out in paragraph 138 of the NPPF. These functions of the Greenbelt are to maintain the openness of the Greenbelt, prevent towns from merging, restricting urban sprawl, avoiding encroachment in the open countryside, and preserving the setting and special character of historic towns. General advice has been provided, further on in the report, general advice has been provided on planning policies which would form part of later future reserved matters applications to aid the applicant in any future submissions. The site has also been identified as being located within the Benfleet and Southend Marshes, Blackwater Estuary and Foulness zones of influence for the Essex Coast Recreational Disturbance Avoidance and Mitigation Strategy, which is a bit of a mouthful, which is why we just refer to it as RAMS. There are zones of influence for protected habitat sites. The developer has not offered to undertake a unilateral undertaking or other form of legal agreement to pay a RAMS contribution, or submitted their own appropriate assessment, or made an upfront payment to mitigate this harm. Usually officers would seek to resolve minor issues such as this. However, it has not been possible to rectify this issue prior to presenting this item this evening and given the timeframes with the submitted appeal. Turning to the final planning balance and conclusion, the framework sets out a presumption in favour of sustainable development. However, it's been identified that the site is within 3 zones of influence of coastal habitats and within the Greenbelt, both of which are listed as protected areas under footnote 7. The NPPF attaches substantial weight to any harm to the Greenbelt by reason of inappropriateness and its harm to the character, purpose and function of the Greenbelt, and this application conflicts with the NPPF. Conversely, there is a significant shortfall of overall market and affordable housing supply in the borough, which the development would contribute towards. The development would also provide some short-term economic benefit in the terms of temporary construction work. In terms of this balancing exercise, despite the cumulative benefits of the proposal, it's not considered that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the harm caused to the Greenbelt as a result of the proposal. Therefore, it is considered that very special circumstances necessary do not exist of sufficient quantity or to a degree that outweighs the harm to the Greenbelt. Therefore, the proposal has been assessed to have an unmitigated harm against the Greenbelt and identified habitat sites. A couple of points I'd like to make is I would point out on page 6 of the report that it states the site is within 200 metres of Thundersley Great Common SSI. This is an error on officer's part, and I apologise. It is actually some 850 metres from this SSI. You will also see this evening, before all members, and there was a copies at the back of for the public gallery, a copy of the late letter schedule. A late letter was received by a member of the public this evening. However, the comments are already addressed in the public consultation, sort of the bullet points that are listed before you, so I've not listed those in detail. You will also see that we've had a couple of late representations from Essex County Council Place Services. The first being from the archaeology team, which has identified that the proposed layout seems to preserve the historic layout and boundaries of the site. Given its archaeological potential, conditions have been recommended to be imposed on any grant of consent. This is relating to other similar field boundaries and field layouts elsewhere in Essex, which have been dated back to medieval times. It's also similar to land north of Daws Heath Road as well. Secondly, representations from a senior ecologist have been made with a holding objection due to insufficient information on the Hazel Dormouse survey methodology, which they have been unable to ascertain whether this has been undertaken correctly, and represents a new objection to the proposal. There is guidance within from the central government that advises that the presence of a protected species and the extent to which this might be affected by the proposed development must be established prior to planning permission being granted. Therefore, if there's a reasonable likelihood of a protected species being present and affected by the development, the survey should be completed and any necessary measures to protect the species should be in place before the permission is granted. Therefore, an amendment is before you this evening to proposed reason for refusal 2 to include the additional information provided yesterday in relation to the Hazel Dormouse survey. Councillor Lillis, even though he isn't here this evening, has also pointed out an omission from the report which states that no response has been provided from the Essex Badger Protection Group. An initial objection was received due to there being no badger survey carried out. However, a full response has been provided by the applicant and provided to Essex Badger Protection Group, setting out that a full survey of the site had been undertaken, no badger sets had been discovered on the site. There's no dispute that the site may be used for foraging or for transit through the site, but on this basis it was considered that mitigation measures during construction could be secured by appropriately worded conditions at the reserve matter stage of development. The Essex Badger Protection Group were consulted on these amended documents, but they have not provided any further response. It's not considered that these late representations impact on the overall recommendation, apart from the amendment to reason for refusal 2 set out before you on the late letter schedule. And that is it for the application this evening, and this is recommended for refusal. So I'll hand back to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Councillor Knott, would you like to make your statement, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and also thank you to Ian Butts and his planning team for the work they put into looking into this application. And also I'd like to thank them for coming to what I believe is the right decision in recommending that this is refused. In fact, I go as far to say it's probably only the logical conclusion that could be drawn from the facts as you've seen them. The officer's report clearly outlines the very sound reasons why they are recommending refusal. And to be quite honest, there's not too much I can add to that, especially as I only have 3 minutes. But members of the committee, you have before you that report. You've had a chance to read it. And you can see exactly for yourselves how clear the grounds are for refusing the application, how compelling the evidence is. You've seen that. And you also have seen comments made by around 400 residents, who have objected to the application, making clear their very valid concerns regarding lack of infrastructure around this development, their concerns of losing an area of ancient woodland that supports a very diverse amount of wildlife and plant life. In fact, this woodland area is part of a patchwork of local green areas that supports endangered species, such as the Heath fritillary butterfly. And we've heard tonight about the dormouse, the hazel dormouse. That dormouse is extinct already in 12 counties in this country. Now, you'll also have read their concerns regarding losing yet another area used by horse riders to graze and exercise their horses. The horse riding community have already lost stables and exercise areas less than 1 mile away from this site in the same road just a few years ago, due to a development that was pushed through by the last Conservative administration, contrary to all the objections of hundreds of local people then. So tonight, members of the committee, I'm asking you strongly not to ignore the concerns of the residents. Many have come out tonight and are sitting in the public gallery. But why are they here? Yes, they're here because they want to object to this application for the reasons that you know, but they're also here because they want their voice heard. For once, they want a council that will actually listen to them and take note of their objections. So, members of the committee, tonight I'm asking you, on behalf of those residents in my ward that have actually noted those objections to you, that have sent the objections in, for those people that have actually come to the building tonight, and I believe possibly there are some even in the atrium, I'm asking you to support the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. And if you do, when the appeal is heard, there will be a clear, united, resounding message sent to the government inspector that this council, this community, are completely opposed to this development, totally 100% united and opposed. And I really hope and ask you tonight to take note of the officer's recommendation and refuse the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Knott. Before I move the recommendation, do members have any questions for the Planning Officer about the planning application? Please note, this is the members' opportunity to seek clarification from the Planning Officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding the application. Members should refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. I'd also ask if members could ask particular singular questions initially, so I'll give everyone the opportunity to speak, and then we'll come round for any supplementary or secondary questions. So, Councillor Savage.
As part of the development, are there any proposals for social housing or truly affordable properties within that development?
So it doesn't form part of this application because it would form part of a reserved matters application at a later stage. However, it has been indicated by the applicant that there would be 40% of the houses on site would be what's deemed by central government as affordable housing, and there'd be a mixture of different housing types, number of bedrooms between houses, bungalows, etc. that are proposed on site. The exact nature of this would be determined at a later stage.
Councillor Skip.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just for the benefit of the those here tonight, can you confirm that the ancient woodland is not actually included as part of this site, please?
So the ancient woodland, the boundary of it runs along here and up here. So all of this land to the south, and including this part of the development site here, is ancient woodland. However, as part of this indicative plan, they're proposing a 30-metre buffer, which is fairly standard, between the development and the ancient woodland, and they're indicating that they're going to provide drainage basins and public open space in that buffer zone.
Councillor Sage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As this is ancient woodland, has there been a bat survey done?
So bats form part of their ecological survey. It has been considered as part of the application, but there's been no objection raised to the proposal on bats.
Councillor Savage.
So a secondary question with respect to the ancient woodland. As it forms within the boundary that's drawn up there, could in future those trees all been hacked down because there's already been planning permission put onto that corner of, or the south side of Daws Heath Road?
So similarly, in a similar vein to greenbelt protection, the MPPF also provides protection to ancient woodlands and says that development should not adversely, or along the similar lines, should not adversely affect ancient woodlands. So whilst it, in theory, an application could come forward in the future to fell and build houses in that, it would require an application. It wouldn't be sort of a given that that could take place.
Councillor Howlett.
Yeah, could you just confirm that this plot of land wasn't in the 1998 local plan or the withdrawn local plan?
So in the 1998 local plan, this area of land is allocated as greenbelt, and then it did not form part of a land allocation in the local plan, which was recently withdrawn.
Are there any other questions? The Planning Officer's recommendation is that the planning permission be refused for the reasons as amended in the report. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting, and can we try to keep it to around about 4 minutes? Who would like to speak first?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This, as the officer has said, this did not form part of the 1998 local plan for development. It was protected being put in that local plan, and in the now withdrawn local plan was also not identified as a development site. Also, the MPPF states that, as the officer again said, that special circumstances should be evidenced if you're going to overturn that ruling. There is no special evidence or circumstances to suggest that this site should be used for development, so I will support the officer's recommendation for refusal in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Skipp. Councillor Thornton.
Yes, I'd like to thank Stephen and the Planning Department for the backwards and forwards in answering all my questions to this. Totally in agreement with the recommendation. And I only want to stress that we need to have as robust reasons as possible for when this goes to appeal. Thank you very much.
Councillor Barton-Brown.
I mean, for me, this creates urban sprawl and really affects the boundaries, the sense of openness, wildlife, everything that stands on this plot of land currently. You can see the difference between what that would look like now and if that was put in place, the difference it would make to the landscape. For me as well, these fields have currently got horses in, obviously belong to Ragwood Stables next to that. What happens to the business and the leisure facility of that stables? And we know many of our community are struggling for placing their horses because many of these similar developments are being targeted. So for me, we not only lose a resident's business, but potentially the leisure facilities for our children and other people that use the area. But again, coming back to school placing, doctor surgeries, hospital places, all this has to be looked at as well. The whole infrastructure around supporting this kind of development for me, it's a resounding no.
Councillor Anderson.
Chairman, turning this application down on a green belt basis, is that reason robust enough to deter the planning officer at national level on appeal to pass this? Thank you.
That sounded more like a question than a statement, Councillor Anderson. Was that a rhetorical question?
No, I'm just saying to you, is it robust enough to turn this application down on a greenbelt basis, or do we need more reasons? Thank you.
That's for you to decide based upon the evidence that's been presented in the discussion tonight, Councillor Anderson. But thank you. Councillor Savage.
So here's a dilemma for us. Because of 20 years of not delivering a local plan, we find speculative applications like this coming through. A plethora of them are going to come through, without a doubt. And unless we start utilising our brownfield sites, something that I know that our Conservative friends have real trouble with, we are going to end up in more and more difficulty fighting off applications like this. And I think the panel really needs to get a grip with this, because there is no justification for this development whatsoever. We're working on a local plan as we are speaking right at this minute. A local need, we know what our local need is. We've got a really good idea of what our real need is. There's just no justification for this whatsoever. This is just abhorrent. And as Councillor Barton-Brown has said, my own daughters have ridden that land, were taught to ride at Ragwood. It's a facility to our community, not just for our community now, but for communities for hundreds of years. That's been there for thousands of years. Why would we want to destroy that bit of land? It's just abhorrent, and I fully support refusing this application.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I absolutely support everything that's been said about this application tonight. Councillor Savage has made a very good point, so has the councillor over there. And I totally support what the officer's recommendation is for refusal. I absolutely support that wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is for refusal. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. That is unanimous. The motion is carried and the application is recommended for refusal. And that concludes the business for this evening. Thank you very much for attending and a very good evening. Safe travels.